I've spent over $300,000 over the last 4 years living in Southern California. Should I have purchased a home instead? Well, I'm going to show you a breakdown. Had I bought the same house I've been renting for the last 4 years, I'm going to show you those results. They even shocked me. Most people think renting is just throwing money down the drain, but not the Nobel Prize-winning economist Robert Shiller. Shiller won the Nobel Prize for showing over the last 150 years in the United States, home prices, when adjusted for inflation, have basically been flat. It's just the last 20 or 30 years that have inflated our perception of the valuations on these homes. So is it just recency bias that's causing us to lean towards homeownership over renting, or are there other factors to consider? Over the last 15 years, I've owned multiple primary residences as well as invested in fix and flips and acquired rental properties. So I understand the real estate game. The last primary residence we bought was for about $360,000, which is crazy to think that the amount of rent I've paid in Southern California just in the last 4 years could have basically paid off that house. But it's not all numbers, and that's what we're going to dive into today. Hey, if you're new here, welcome. My name's Tom Polifka. I share insights to help you make more money, keep it, grow it, and even spend it. Let's dive right in. We're going to talk about timing and how important it is when we're comparing renting versus home buying. Good timing versus bad timing. I'm going to show you two real-life examples when buying a home resulted in two completely different financial positions for each of the parties. When we look at these homes, they're both very similar. They're both in Denver, Colorado, both in the low 200,000 range when they were paid for, and both sold in the same year. The main difference, though, is the year in which they were purchased. It was only a few years apart, but had a major impact on the difference in the results. Let's take a look. So the first example, the first home that was purchased in April of 2005, this was a friend of mine. They paid $207,000 at the time, put down about 5%, and had a 5.8% interest loan. For us, we purchased our home, which my wife and I bought in March of 2009. We paid $238,000. We put about 5% down, and then also our interest rate was 4.75. So not a huge difference, about a point different. The other remaining stuff was very similar. Private mortgage insurance had to be paid on both. The property taxes, insurance costs, HOA fees, all very similar costs. So the main difference was how long these properties were held and during which time. The first property, my friend, when they purchased in '05, this was a few years before the financial market collapse. So during that time period, they did want to purchase another home in order to get more space with their growing family. But unfortunately, they couldn't sell their property because the value of the home was actually less than the remaining balance on the loan. So they decided to stick it out. They waited until September of 2014 to sell their property. They were able to sell it for $250,000 at that time. During this time, though, they had already put in $100,000 in interest towards this home. $30,000 went towards principal. By the time they sold, it was a $166,000 loan balance. And at the closing table, after removing expenses and the proceeds, they were able to walk away with $71,000 in a ability to put it towards a down payment on another home, which is great. But when you look at the actual results of owning that home during that time period, how much did it actually cost them? So over the course of that 9.5 years, it ended up costing them $133,000 to own that property. The thing is, we look at home ownership as this massive investment, and it's the biggest investment we'll ever make in our lives. But for the most part, a lot of times that's not the case. It's just basically paying for a place to live. In this example, if we were to divide the $133,000 by the 113 months that they lived in the home, it cost them about $1,200 per month to live in that home. The average rent for similar property in that neighborhood probably would have gone for about $1,600. So all in all, they were paying less than they were to basically rent a place to live in a property like that. For us, we ended up buying just after the financial crisis. We were actually buying a home that was foreclosed. We were coming in at a point where home prices had depressed, and so we were able to be lucky enough to purchase during this time period. All of the other things remaining the same as far as property taxes, insurance, closing costs, all very similar. We were able to sell our home for $311,000.
We had only been in there for about 5 years, so the interest payments were less, 53,000 during that time period. And we were able to walk away at the closing table with approximately 89,000. But the main difference is the cost of us to own that home during that time period. If you were to divide the 44,000 by the 62 months that we lived there, it would have been about a $710 per month cost to basically live at that property. The average rent for a similar home, this was a slightly bigger home than this other example, would have been about maybe $1,700. So you can see there the difference is quite different, about $1,000 a month. So we both ended up losing money in this situation, as you can see, but one of us was able to lessen the amount of impact that it had on us just because of the luck of when we purchased a home. So hopefully this gives you some insight as far as how the impact of timing can have on when you buy your home and how much value you can extract from the home over that time period.
There's something else that happens when you sell a home, and it might shock you. Did you catch it in that previous breakdown? It's something I refer to as the closing table bias. If you've ever sold a home before, I know you can relate to this, but for those that haven't, let me set the scene. Imagine you purchased your first home 5 years ago, and you've decided to start a family. You decided to sell this home in order to get a bigger one and live in a better neighborhood. There's a lot of emotion that's going into this day where you will be turning over the keys to your home in exchange for the proceeds from the sale. When you get to the closing table and see that giant pile of papers that you need to sign, it doesn't really impact you. You're still going down memory lane of all the experiences you've had at your home, and you're excited for closing this part of your life out. After about 45 minutes of signing papers, the title officer tells you to expect $71,033 to be wired into your bank account today. As you're driving away, you check your bank balance on your phone, and sure enough, the deposit hits your account. You get that instant dopamine hit that makes you just feel great, and you can't wait to go celebrate what just happened. What you didn't realize is you ended up losing $93,000 over the course of the time you owned that home. This is primarily due to the interest that you paid in because you got in at the wrong time. Poor timing. So this is what I call the closing table bias. It's that elation that you feel because you see a large check or a large deposit into your bank account, yet when you look at the numbers, you actually have lost money on that home. Morgan Housel is the author of Psychology of Money, an incredible book on how and why we spend money the way we do. On a recent interview, that when he was asked whether or not buying a home is a good investment, here's what he had to say.
It doesn't matter. I think these are just purely lifestyle decisions. And I think so many people get screwed up when they're in a spot in their life where they should be renting because they need to be mobile. They need to move around to a new job, new career, new school, whatever it is. But they end up buying because they think they're going to make money doing it.
Buy versus rent. What if? Earlier, I promised that I would break down had I purchased the same home I've been renting for the last 4 years here in San Diego, California, how much that would have cost me or how much I would have made from buying it. The results are pretty crazy. Let's dive in.
In July of 2019, my family and I decided to make the trek out to California and start a new chapter of our lives. We decided to settle in Carlsbad, California, about 15 minutes from the beach in a beautiful neighborhood, but we didn't have any family or friends, so we didn't really know what neighborhoods were good. We decided to rent and figure out, where we were going to live and potentially buy later on. Maybe that was not the best choice. Let's take a look. So the first year we moved into a beautiful home in a great neighborhood. It was pretty expensive rent. I'm not going to lie. It was $5,500 a month. In that first year we paid $66,000. The rent went up the second year a little bit to $5,800. And then really in 2021 is when the rents started to increase quite a bit because of the value of the homes were going up and rents were rising as well. So $6,400 for both years 3 and 4. Over that time period, including renter's insurance, we paid approximately $293,000 to live at that property. Now let's compare it to had we purchased that same home when we moved in July of 2019. That home was worth approximately $1.2 million at that time. Had we put 20% down or $240,000, the loan would have been $960,000. We would have had loan payments with principal and interest only at $4,400 Again, the property taxes, insurance, and HOA fees generally are lumped into those payments, but I kept them separate just for simplicity's sake. The interest payment or the interest rate was 3.7%, which is obviously a great rate back then. And the property taxes, insurance, all of that was calculated to come out at the time of sale, as well as the selling costs. So had we sold in July of 2023, after about 4 years of living there, it hurts even looking at it, but we would have had 1.2 million at the closing table, and total profit after paying for interest and all the fees would have been about 825,000 just in 4 years. Now, clearly, nobody can tell what's going to happen in the future. If you can, let me know. I'd love to know, but hindsight is always 2020. Would we have changed things? Sure. If we knew that we were able to basically turn our investment into 825,000, we would have done that. But again, based on what we had in mind and what we were trying to figure out where to live in the neighborhood, we made the best choice we could at the time, but who knows?
So why did we decide to rent versus buy a home when we moved to California? And why should you? For me, it comes down to lifestyle and what season of life that you're in. When you're making a decision to move, especially from one state to another like we did, there's a lot of decisions to be made. Now, clearly, if we could look ahead in time and see the future and see that, selling a home in 4 years would make $600,000 in profit by doing that, sure, we'd go back in time and we would have bought a home when we moved from Colorado to California. But obviously, you can't see the future, so you have to do the best with what you've got. And for us, when we were moving from one state to another, we didn't know anyone in California. We didn't have any family, any friends, and or a job there. Granted, I was able to work remotely, so that wasn't necessarily the issue. But the main issue for us was our family, our kids. We needed to find a school for them to go to. And then we needed to find a house that was in somewhat close proximity to them. And also we needed to look at our lifestyle. What did we want to do? What was important to us? For us, we wanted to be closer to the beach as possible because that was something new and exciting for us. So again, when you're looking at renting versus buying, the numbers generally don't add up until you look at it after the fact, and you can't tell the future. A lot of it is timing and a lot of it is luck when you get into the market. You can't time the market perfectly. So what I would say is base your decisions on renting based on your lifestyle, and it will make it easier. You're not as committed to buying a home or as you are to buying a home when you're renting. There are definitely some pros and cons for both, but for me, it's more about lifestyle because as you look at your life, things come and go, and a lot of things you can't predict, like a pandemic or interest rates skyrocketing, which creates the value of homes going up with it. Well, you've stuck around this long, so hopefully you've got some value out of this video. And if you have, please hit that like and subscribe button. It'll help me share with other people if they're in a similar situation as you are, trying to make that enormous decision of whether I should rent or buy a home. Have a great day. Best of luck. We'll see you next time.